Peasants in Honduras, for example, are driven off their lands, which are turned over to a range for beef production for export. They are then permitted to cut down the forests and plant crops for themselves for 2 years, after which they're driven off again. The net result is increase in the statistics of development, increase in the gross national product, destruction of the resources, and deterioration of the condition of the people. So hundreds of thousands of people are starving in Honduras, but statistically it looks like an improvement. And that is very typical of the development model that's been pursued. Development's fine as long as it's in our interest, as long as our resources are being developed for our purposes. If a country, or any group within a country, begins to be concerned with domestic needs, then plainly it has to be stopped. These people must understand that our resources happen to be in their lands, but they're ours. Concern in the early about Vietnamese independence was that it might have a what the American planners call a rotten apple effect. One rotten apple might infect the barrel, the way Dean Acheson put it in connection with Greece. If there's independence in one region, it may have a demonstration effect and may be picked up elsewhere. Well, the Cold War has proven to be highly functional for the superpowers. It provides each superpower with a way to control its own population, to bring its own population to support acts of violence and intimidation and intervention in its own domains. And fear of the great enemy is the classic device to achieve this end, and the Cold War has been used very effectively in this manner on both sides. The United States has essentially two demands of its European allies. One is that they ensure that their own populations remain under control and not move in the direction of independent nationalism, national capitalism, certainly no form of socialism. So keep politics and the economic structure essentially under control. Secondly, they must be available for intervention in the third world, but in a limited fashion within the framework of U.S. power. The general dissidence of American public opinion made it impossible for the administration to emulate its predecessors, Kennedy and Johnson, for example, and simply to carry out direct aggression, open direct aggression intervention in Central America. They were forced underground. They had to construct an international terrorist network of considerable sophistication, with shadowy CIA subsidiaries enlisting proxy states such as Taiwan and South Korea and Saudi Arabia and Israel and so on in support of these objectives. The press played its role quite faithfully in the El Salvador case. When the U.S. organized slaughter began in 1980, the press pretended that the atrocities were being carried out by uncontrollable right-wing death squads. They knew that that was a lie, and they later conceded that the government had been telling them that 90% of the atrocities were carried out by the Salvadoran government. Throughout, the U.S. press has portrayed President Duarte as a liberal reformist who is under attack by lunatics on the right and on the left. This President Duarte is responsible for more killings than any single person in the bloody history of Latin America. One can attribute at least 40,000 dead to his role. Once the atrocities had essentially succeeded in their goal, press coverage declined, debate reduced to zero. There is complete enthusiasm over this marvelous triumph of democracy, now that any conceivable basis for democracy has been destroyed in one of the major exercises of international terrorism and destruction and slaughter of the modern period. In Nicaragua, in the immediate post-revolutionary period, there was a rapid increase in health services, in literacy, in subsistence agriculture. There was striking beginnings of economic development. This was registered by the international banks, by the charitable organizations. Oxfam, for example, described Nicaragua as unique among 76 developing countries in the commitment of the political leadership towards economic and social development and the engagement of the population in these reforms. All of that set the alarm bells ringing in Washington, and one can easily understand why. Consider a peasant in Honduras who's starving to death and who can look across the border and see that in a country no better endowed than his own, people are beginning to plant subsistence crops and they're getting health care and they have some hope for the future while he's starving to death and his children are starving to death. He'll ask the question, why not us? And the rot will spread. And it may spread to Guatemala, and it may spread beyond. And that's exactly what has concerned American planners. It is essential for us to mobilize against the danger of nuclear holocaust today, but we must also come to understand and appreciate and concern ourselves with the constant, regular costs of these systems of oppression. Now, that's harder to visualize and to bear in mind than a terminal nuclear exchange. But that is the real meaning of the Cold War.